Welcome back. This is Lecture 2 of PS201, Define the Problem. If Lecture 1 gave you the framework, this lecture gives you the most important step in it. Everything that follows, the analysis, the synthesis, the recommendations, depends entirely on whether you have correctly defined what you are trying to solve. Get this wrong, and no amount of brilliant analysis will save you. We are in Lecture 2. In Lecture 1, we covered the full framework overview. Now we go deep on Step 1, defining the problem. Lectures 3 through 9 build on this foundation. A weak definition is the single most common cause of project failure, not bad analysis, not poor communication. A wrong question. The uncomfortable truth, the problem you are handed is almost never the problem you should be solving. Clients state briefs based on what they already believe is the cause. Managers define scope based on what they have data for. The real question, the one whose answer would actually change the decision, is almost always buried underneath the stated brief. Your job at Step 1 is to find it. A good problem statement has three components: context, complication, and question. Context is the stable background, facts everyone agrees on. The complication is what has changed or what tension has emerged. The question is what the decision-maker now needs to resolve. Each component is necessary. If any one is missing, the statement is incomplete and the work will drift. Start with context. This is the stable background, facts that nobody disputes. For Northmart, the context is, Northmart has operated 6 grocery stores profitably for 5 years, with gross margin consistently between 17 and 19%. That is context. It is not the problem, it is the starting point. The complication is what disrupts the stable background. Something has changed, or a tension has emerged. For Northmart, over the past 18 months, gross margin has fallen from 18 to 11%, driven primarily by rising input costs and shifting consumer behavior. That is the complication. It tells you why this matters now. The question follows directly from the complication. It is not open-ended, it is the specific decision that the complication forces. For Northmart, what structural changes must Northmart make to return gross margin to 16% within 12 months? Notice the precision, a target number, a timeframe, and a defined scope. The question is answerable. And critically, alignment. All three components must be signed off by the decision-maker before any work begins. This step is skipped constantly. Teams assume they know what the client wants. They do not. 15 minutes of explicit alignment at the start saves weeks of misdirected effort at the end. Never begin analysis without a written problem statement that your sponsor has approved. Once you have the problem statement, you need success criteria, a definition of what solved looks like before a single analysis begins. The first criterion is measurability. Attach a number or an observable outcome to success. Improved performance is not a success criterion. Return gross margin to 16% is. If you cannot measure it, you cannot know when you are done. Success criteria must also be time-bound. Name a deadline or a review date. Without a time boundary, scope expands indefinitely. You can always do one more analysis, interview one more stakeholder, refine one more model. The deadline is not a constraint on quality. It is what forces prioritization, which is the whole point of Step 3. Success criteria must be agreed up front, signed off by all key decision-makers before work starts. In practice, this is routinely skipped. Teams deliver a recommendation and then discover that 2 key stakeholders had different definitions of success in mind. The criteria were never made explicit. That conversation, avoided at the start, becomes a crisis at the end. And finally, specific. Not improve performance, name the exact metric and target. Not reduce costs, specify which cost line, by how much, by when. Vague success criteria are comfortable because they delay the moment of disagreement. That comfort is a trap. Specificity forces the alignment conversation early, when it is cheap. Avoiding it delays the conversation until it is expensive. A useful diagnostic for testing your problem statement is the 5Ws run through each question before the first analysis begins. The first W is who. Who is affected by this problem? Who is the decision maker? Who needs to act on the recommendation? A problem statement that does not identify the decision maker clearly is not complete. What, specifically, is the problem? Not we have a performance issue, but what is the precise metric, the precise gap, the precise question? What does the current state look like, and what does the target state look like? The gap between those two states is the problem you are defining. Where is the problem occurring? Is it in all 6 stores or just 2? Is it across all product categories or one segment? Geographic and organizational scope matters. A problem that appears everywhere is different from a problem concentrated in one area. The scope shapes the disaggregation in step 2. When did this problem emerge, and when does it need to be resolved? A problem developing over 2 years is structurally different from one that emerged last quarter. The timeline tells you whether you are dealing with a trend or a shock, which shapes which analyses are most productive. And why does it matter? What is the consequence of not solving it? This is a prioritization anchor. If the consequence of inaction is modest, the problem may not warrant a full structured process. If the consequence is existential, as it is for Northmart, it justifies the full investment. Know the stakes before committing the resources. There are 4 common definition mistakes. The first, accepting the brief as stated. The problem handed to you is almost always a symptom, not a cause. Sales are down is a symptom. The cause requires investigation. When someone hands you a brief, your first instinct should be to interrogate it, not execute it. The second mistake, defining by solution. We need to launch a new product line. This is a solution masquerading as a problem statement. It forecloses options before the question is clear. Always translate solution statements back into problem statements. What is preventing us from meeting our growth targets opens the question correctly. Third, scope too broad. Improve the business is not a solvable problem. When scope is unbounded, analysis never converges. Constrain the scope explicitly, which aspect of the business, over what period, for what decision. The constraint is not a limitation, it is what makes the problem tractable. And fourth, missing the decision maker. A problem statement without a named decision maker is an academic exercise. Who will act on the recommendation? Who has the authority to approve it? If you do not know, you cannot design a process that produces something they can use. Identify the decision maker before the first meeting. Let us make this concrete. A fuzzy problem statement, we need to grow the business. No scope, no measure, no time frame, no question. This could mean anything, and because it means anything, it directs nothing. A team working from this statement will disperse across dozens of potential analyses and never converge. Compare, by Q3, which of the 3 product lines should we exit to return EBITDA to 8%? That is a sharp problem statement. It is bounded in time, measurable by a specific metric, limited to a defined scope, and answerable with a clear decision for each product line. The analytical program almost writes itself. That is what a good definition enables. Before moving to step 2, disaggregation, your definition must pass 6 checks. 1. Is there a named decision maker? 2. Does the statement have context, complication, and question? 3. Are success criteria measurable and time-bound? 4. Is the scope explicitly bounded? 5. Have you run the 5Ws and found no unanswered gaps? And 6. Has the decision maker signed off? This last check is the most frequently skipped. Email them the problem statement. Ask them to confirm that this is the question they need answered. Their response will often surface a constraint or preference you did not know about, and it is far better to surface it now than after 6 weeks of analysis. If all 6 checks pass, you are ready for step 2. 3 things to take from this lecture. First, the problem you are handed is rarely the problem you should be solving. Always interrogate the brief before accepting it. The 5 minutes spent clarifying the question are worth more than any individual analysis that follows. Second, a good problem statement has context, complication, and question, and all three must be aligned with the decision maker before work begins. If you have only one or two of those three, stop and complete the definition before proceeding. Third, success criteria must be measurable, time-bound, specific, and agreed upfront. A problem without agreed success criteria has no finish line, and projects without finish lines do not finish. Hold those three as we move into disaggregation in Lecture 3. 3 questions to consider. First, think of a project where the brief changed partway through, where the team discovered they were solving the wrong problem. At what point could a sharper definition have caught that? How much rework would it have prevented? Second, how do you handle a decision maker who refuses to commit to a specific success criterion, who says they will know success when they see it? What is the risk of proceeding without explicit agreement, and what techniques might move them toward specificity? Third, try writing a problem statement for a challenge you are currently working on, using the context, complication, question structure. Does it pass the 6-point checklist? If not, which element is missing? Bring that to Lecture 3. See you there.